again, recap real quickly because I explained it outside before the recording. There are 5 kinds of flour offerings. One is not baked and not fried. The other 2 are 2 kinds of baked. One of them is baked with a lot of oil in it. The other one is with very little oil in it. And then there's 2 kinds of fried. There's deep fried, which you throw the dough into a lot of deep pan with a lot of oil in it, and the oil would saturate it and it would be kind of soft. Or a shallow pan where the oil would kind of burn out real quick, and all you'd be left with is the flour that was in there. And when it would get fried, it would fry crisp and hard. So the deep fryer made it soft, and the shallow fryer made it like more like a hard kind of a cracker in that kind of a way. So let's learn inside this these halachas, hopefully able to explain it. We'll get through today's chumash. Okay, as we said, today's class, unfortunately, I had to run last minute, so we're doing it at 8 o'clock. Okay, we have to actually go back a little bit because we were in the middle of yesterday's. We have to go back to yesterday's class, the middle of the end of Monday's class. Okay. So if the guy's really poor and he can't afford not just an animal, he can't even afford a bird. B'nefesh ki sakriv karba mincha. And a person who literally, a poor person, it's like he's giving up his life because he's taking the bread off his table. You know, he can't afford, not a rich guy who comes off, the vacation or whatever, something else. It's coming off the bread. He only could afford flour. And he gives that, and Hashem loves that. Hashem seeing his commitment, how he's giving his last pennies off his table. He sacrificed karba mincha when he gives the flour offering. A gift, right? A gift. You give a gift to Hashem. Soiles, it has to be soiles. Soiles means fine flour. As we said the whole time, you want to give a gift to Hashem, Maimonides says it's got to be first class. So even if you're a poor man giving the cheapest item, but it's got to be classy. You can't give cheap flour. You got to give good, fine flour. Soiles yeh karbani. He should give a fine flour offering. So the guy said, I want to give a donation of a mincha offering, meaning the flour, the meal offering. That's what I want to give. Not an animal, not a bird. I want to give a meal offering. The problem is, what if he never articulated? We said there's 5 kinds of meal offering. There's 2 kinds of oven offerings, and there's 2 kinds of pan fried offerings. So, but what does a guy do? So any standard time he says I want to give a meal offering, doesn't describe what kind he wants. It's automatically a flour, non-cooked, non-fried, non-baked a meal offering. It's just flour. If the guy just said I want to give a meal offering, it just means flour. But yatzak ala shemen, you got to pour oil over the whole thing. So even though he's not cooking this one, he's just donating flour. On that flour has got to be oil. It probably makes it also nicer, more of a gift. So you also got to pour, as we said, it was about 11 ounces of oil on top of these 2.5 liters of flour. You got to put 11 ounces of oil on top of it. So all the sacrifices got to have flour. And on top of that, you should also put spices. So you're bringing basically a basket, not a basket, a bowl. 2.5 liters of flour. On top of it, we said about, 11 ounces of oil on top of that flour. And then to the side, you're going to put also spices of frankincense, and that is the gift you're going to bring to Hashem. Now, the Kohen, we'll see in a minute actually what he'll do. Okay. Verse 2, Ve'evia b'nei Aaron. So the guy comes to the temple, the non-Kohen comes to the temple, and he brings it to Aaron's sons. He brings it, Mr. Kohen, I'm a poor man, I brought a gift to you, what I could afford, and I brought to you a meal offering. So what do they do? Now, it's not like the other sacrifices. What happens to the other sacrifices? If it's an animal, you slaughter the neck, slaughter it, and you get the blood in a cup, and that blood goes on the altar. If it's a bird, we said the bird, you can't collect blood in a cup because it's a tiny bird. So what do you? So you squeeze the bird's neck on the altar, but this is a flour offering. So how do you sacrifice that on the altar? So he does something called kamitza. V'kamatz misham malai kumtzai. He does a kamitza, as I said before in the class. He does a scoop with his fingers. He sticks his hand. Normally you can't eat with your fingers, right? Here they did that. I think maybe the temple they did a lot of stuff with their hands, but the Kohen stuck his hand into the middle of the bowl and did a scoop. The kametz misham malai kumtzai, a full fistful, but only the fistful meaning what he catches in between his 3 middle fingers. Misalta umisham, to scoop up flour and scoop up oil in that scoop. I'll call levainasa, but do not scoop up levaina, do not scoop up the frankincense. And later on, we're going to talk about salt. We're going to put no salt or no frankincense is allowed in the scooping that you're scooping out of here, in the kmitza that's being done. The hikter, and then you should burn it to take that scoop, and that scoop goes in the altar, right? Not like the blood that's being sprinkled on two ends. This is a gift, not the whole thing is going to Hashem. The Kohen will eat almost all of it. Only a small scoop of that 2.5 liters of flour and 11 ounces of oil, only of that a scoop will go out and be burned on the Kohen to Hashem. As Askarasa, and it will be remembered before Hashem, the gift offering. That's the part you're giving to Hashem for your gift offering on the Mizbeach. It is a pleasant smelling offering that he gives to Hashem. But what happens to the rest? Okay, that's verse 2. What do you do with the rest? There, you got a full bowl. Just a little bit of the 2.5 liters of flour and the 11 ounces of oil is gone. What do you do with the leftovers? The Kohanim have a party, but who gets the most? Here's an interesting rule, just so you know. Who gets all the food? Who gets the rights to it? Aaron gets the cake, which means Aaron doesn't have to ask. The high priest doesn't need permission from anybody. The high priest can go, take any piece of meat he wants. He goes in, he says, I want this, I want that, I want 2 slices of this, whatever, 1 steak, I want this part of the meat. The high priest is all right to get anything he wants. Ulavanov, however, the Kohanim, as Rashi says, they got to split it. They go, they figure out a system. You know, I know, like I always talk about with my kids in the car, who gets the front seat, who gets the back seat. You know, it's always a debate. The Kohanim somehow have a system. They have a system of who gets what, and they figure out who gets it. So Aaron could choose. In general, I believe it's by all the sacrifices, Aaron could choose what he wants. He gets whatever the remainder is, the main piece, at least here, regarding the meal offering, and the other Kohanim divide it. Kodesh Kodashim Yishei Hashem, it's considered Holy of Holies, and they have to treat it in that special way. Only once they burn it on the altar then they gave God his portion that needs to go to Hashem. They gave the altar the portion that needs to go into them. Do they get to partake in the remainders, the leftovers? So Kohanim get to enjoy the leftovers after what Hashem God hit the part on the altar that was supposed to go to God. Okay, so that's option 1 of a meal offering. Okay, what's option number 1? No baking, no frying involved. But what happens if the guy says, verse 4, tanur? He says, I want a oven-baked gift. We're going to see soon, it's going to have to be within 18 minutes, or no water, it's going to have to not become chametz. The guy says, oven-baked gift offering. I want my gift offering to be an oven-baked gift offering to Hashem. What happens then? So the poor man says, I don't just want to give a non-baked, I want baked stuff. You know, you're giving Hashem a gift, I want it to be baked. So he has 2 options of baked stuff. Chalois matzos, blulas bashemen. Either they're going to be bread matzahs. I guess they may be called bread because they're mixed with oil. A lot of the whole whole 11.5 ounces of oil is mixed in with the flour, getting it a nice cakey. You know, when you put the oil in the flour, it comes like cake, getting it a nice taste. Blulas bashemen, mixed, a real mix. You mix the whole 11 ounces of oil into the 2.5 liters of flour. You make a nice mixture over there. Or it could be a wafer. I guess that means more like not so much mixed in oil to the thing. Oil will not saturate it. You put a little bit of oil on, and then you'll smear kind of oil on top, and that's considered unleavened wafers. So you could either have unleavened challahs or unleavened wafers. Challahs means the baked option 1 is that it's a very filled with flour, filled with a lot of oil, and wafers are that it's flour, but just with a little bit of oil smeared on top of it. Now, Rashi tells us something interesting here. What grade oil does it have to be? And why is he asking this question? It's because we learned by the menorah that it has to be grade AAA, which means the first drip of oil that comes out of the olive without any sediment behind it. That's the kind of oil. Does these matzahs, you know, you're giving a gift to Hashem, we said it has to be fine flour. Does the oil also need to be grade AAA or not? So Rashi says something interesting. He says, because it says twice the word here, it says the word shemen. Shemen means oil twice. It says belulais b'shemen and meshuchim b'shemen. That's telling you that for this case, grade 2 and grade 3 of olive oil to discussion in the Mishnah is also good enough. It doesn't have to be that first drip of oil that comes out of the olive. It can also be the second grade and third grade. And he says that the Mishnah that discusses exactly the different levels of oil that's needed. So it can also use grade 2 and grade 3 for this olive gift, for the oil of the flour offering that you're giving a gift to Hashem. Now, okay. Now, but the question then becomes, how does the kohen scoop? Remember, I told you by the non-baked one, he scoops for the altar, he scoops out of the flour and the oil and he puts it on the altar. But what about once it's baked? Where is the kohen going to scoop it? And I think we're going to see soon that once it's baked, you break it up again, you break it in half, and then you break it again in half again. Enough, I guess, that the kohen could scoop from the basket of broken baked bread and could give a part of it onto the altar, and then the rest will go to the kohen. So you do the scooping, I believe, whether it's being baked or it's not being baked, you always do the scooping. Now, to add to that, you also always have to donate at least, I think he says, 10 of these challahs. You have to donate 10. These things come in packages of 10, and it's never enough to give one. The poor man needs to make sure that there's a 10. I believe, if I understand correctly, there has to always be a gift of 10, not just one challah, but 10 challahs. Remember, by a bird, we learned even one bird's enough, but it seems from here that if you're giving the flour offering, it can't just come with like one challah. You know, I guess sometimes we drop off a challah for Shabbos. You got to have 10 challahs. When you come to the Beis Hamikdash, you got to have 10 matzahs. One matzah gift is not enough. Verse 5. But what happens if you don't want to do a baked offering? The guy said he wants to do a fried, right? A lot of people like fried better than baked. So if it's shallow fried pan, which is going to make it hard, it's going to make it like a cracker because it's not deep fried. Karban chasaylis flul v'shem, and again, fine flour with oil. Matatzia, it'll be unleavened. It has to be unleavened. It has to be a fried, unleavened situation that's going on over there. But what do you do afterwards? Once it's fried, verse 6, you got to then crush it up, break it into pieces. And then after it's fried, okay, so you're kind of having oil on it a number of times. You're going to put oil in the frying pan so it doesn't burn. You're going to put the flour on top to fry this thing in the frying pan. Then once it's fried, you're going to crack up the cracker into little pieces. Pour oil. Again, look what he says in verse 6. Then you're going to break it up in little pieces. And put oil on it. This is the kind of meal offering that you want to do. Okay. Verse number 6, or I did that already. Verse number 7, next verse. Okay, what about the last? I think we're holding the last kind of option of meal offering that we have. I hope you guys are following. If it's a deep fried pan, that it's going to saturate the item, so it's going to be soft. It's not going to be like a hard cracker. It's going to be soft. Soilas b'shem and tiyasa, again, you have to make it fine flour, and you make it in oil, and you sit in it's absorbed in oil. Then verse 8. So if you do any of the 5 kinds, 2 options of fried, 2 options of baked, and 1 where it's not fried or baked, and you bring the mincha offering from these things to God. You bring it to the temple. The kriva la kohen, and the kohen will bring it for you into the temple where it needs to go. Begisha la mizbeach, he's going to put it on the altar. Now, it's not the blood. Blood was, remember, we said it was sprinkled on the 4 corners at the ends. This thing's actually going on the altar. But where on the altar will this be burnt? And you're going to see, when we learn, there's a different method of where stuff is burnt on the altar. This we wanted to get in front of Hashem. So what does it mean? We're gonna want to get it as close to Hashem as possible on the altar. So where would that be? That would be the closest side that's facing the entrance to the Mishkan, to the Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting. So you're going to put it on top of the altar, on top of the stage, but at the closest side that's facing the door that's going inside that the kohen will enter twice a day to go and to clean the menorah, right in that entranceway to get into the Mishkan. You're going to put it on that side of the altar. You're also going to put it towards the front in the corner, so it's going to be on the southwestern side, because the western side of the altar is the closest to the door. that's going into the actual tabernacle inside the Mishkan, but we want you to do it right when you get up the ramp on the altar, so it's also going to be on the southern western side, coming up to the beginning of the altar, and on the western side, near the door facing the Mishkan. And the Kohen will scoop out and lift up the remembrance for the person from the gift offering. He'll burn it on the altar. It'll be burnt as a fire remembrance for a good smelling fire to Hashem. And all the leftovers, who gets it? Aaron and Levanov, to Aaron and his sons. It's holy of holies for the fire of Hashem. So that's it. That is, we just gave you the overview, the picture of exactly how the meal offering was done. The poor man's meal offering is done. Now, he's going to go in and teach you another important rule. All the minchas, kol ha-mincha, asher takriv LaHashem, that you're sacrificing to God, lo yisiyasa chametz, should not be chametz. Chametz is never a whole year allowed to go on the altar. The altar is chametz free. All year round, the altar is chametz free. You're never allowed to put chametz on the altar. That has to stay chametz free. You cannot put chametz on the altar. Very interesting rule. There, if you'll ask me a question, was there ever in the Beis Hamikdash brought chametz? I will tell you yes, but it was not brought on the altar. When did we have chametz on the altar? That was on the holiday of Shavuos. We brought 2 chalas on the holiday of Shavuos, and those chalas were chametz, but they were not allowed to go on the altar. The altar stayed Pesachdik all year round. Only twice a year would they bring not on the altar 2 chalas. Even when we had all the other flour you should on the temple, it was all chametz free. Remember the 12 breads that stayed in the holies, never allowed to become chametz. Even those 12 breads with the funny faces, whatever, the 2 faces, those were chametz free. I believe even when else will we sacrifice flowers? On the second day of Pesach, right after the first Peseder, the next day of Pesach, we brought a sacrifice. As soon as we're going to see in a moment, that we will read in the Torah in a moment. Again, we're going to bring it right as soon as the grain is starting to ripen. We bring a thing. So we see that the Torah, again, I think we spoke about this in the lesson before, it's representing our parnas, our sustenance, our food, because our food, what's the staple food? Staple food is flour, even though today in our day and age, everyone's gluten-free. But at least in those days, and by many people today, a good Jewish food is a bagel with flax and cream cheese, but it had to be non-chametz bagels that they had in the days. Okay. Kol ha-mincha asher takriv LaHashem, lo yisiyasa chametz. Any mincha offering that you're going to burn on it on the altar to Hashem, it's not allowed to be chametz. And more than that, gichol sa'or, chol devash, any leavening, and not just leavening, any nectar. Rashi explains honey means any nectar from a fruit. You want to put in there, I want to add some honey, I want to add some, jelly from the fruit inside it. No, not allowed. It's got to be flour and oil, and that's it. Like Kiddushin Hashem should never be brought up to Hashem. So none of that stuff is allowed to be brought up to Hashem. So the question then becomes, well, okay, so you're telling me, so I can't ever bring fruit up. What represents the fruit before God? How do I bring an offering if I want to thank Hashem? I got the animals, and I got the birds, and I got the flour, but what about that stuff? How do you thank Hashem for that? Verse 12, Karban reishis takrivu oisel Hashem. You want to give the fruit. That's another story. There's a gift, special gift for that. Whenever the first fruit ripens, I believe specifically from the 7 fruit that Israel was blessed with, if you grew pomegranates in your garden or whatever, you would take the first ripened fruit, bring it as a gift to Hashem, but do not put it on the altar. The altar is not, you can't commemorate the gift that Hashem gave you with your fruit, and that is by thanking Hashem. And there is a time to bring it. As soon as it grows, you're going to bring it then to Hashem. However, do not put it on the altar. The altar it's chametz free, and it's jelly free too. All the fruits and these sweet stuff you're not allowed to bring on the altar. However, what should you put on? Don't ever bring jelly in your sacrifice. But what should you put on? Salt. God likes his food salty. I'm joking about it. Just making some jokes to lighten it a little bit. But karban minchascha b'melach timlach, salted. You should make sure all your meal offerings, in fact, all your sacrifices, everything's got to have a lot of salt. That's how I like my food, actually. Any food that's brought to me at the table, I always put in salt inside of it. It's not because of ritual, just I like a lot of salt. Listen to what he says. You shall never omit, don't put on salt. The covenant, Hashem's covenant, God made a covenant that salt will always be, not because God likes salt, but God made a covenant that salt will always be the almin chasecha on your meal offerings, and in fact, all your sacrifices are karbancha takriv melech on all your sacrifices. There's got to be salt on each limb every time you put a limb on. After you put this flour offering with the oil, and then because you didn't scoop out the frankincense, and you go separately, take the frankincense, put it on top, take a salt shaker. They must have had a lot of salt there, and they bought it in like bags, probably like when we have a snowstorm. We buy like the salt. They must have had a lot of salt there. Pour the salt on top of the thing. So, and that's, if you ever wondered why on your Shabbos table do you always make sure to dip the challah in the salt, now you know. Here's where it comes from, because our Shabbos table is like our table's like a altar, right? It's the altar of Hashem, our table. And by the way, they always tell that our kids, you're not allowed to climb on a table and so on. It's prohibited. It's like a mizbech. It's like an altar. And our challah is like, I guess, kind of like the sacrifice we're doing. So that's why you'll always see people dipping the challah in the salt before they give it out after they make a motzi for this reason. But now we have to ask a question. Why? I get it. So now I answered the question. Why is it that we dip our challah in salt? Now you know why. But if you want to ask further, you're going to ask me another question. Well, why is it that God wanted in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan, there should be salt? Why is it so important? What he likes salt in his food. What does he have with salt? What does Hashem have with salt? So Rashi answers that question. A very interesting Rashi. Rashi says that in the 6 days of creation, Hashem, we know, those of us who were in our class, we know Hashem, I believe it was on the second day, right? Hashem divided the upper waters and the lower waters. Or was that on the third day? And Hashem divided, and then, no, maybe that was the second day. Hashem divided the upper waters and the lower waters. He basically created heaven and separated the upper waters from the lower waters. And the lower waters were upset, and they said, Hashem, I guess upper waters and lower waters represent not just that something is geographically in a different location, but it represents a spiritual difference. So the upper waters also were somehow closer spiritually to Hashem. And the lower waters were bummed out. They said, we're lower down. It's not fair. It's not right. Got it. Why'd you split us? What else in the world did Hashem split? Hashem made a diversion, a separation, a split. It's not fair. Why do they get to be closer to you, Hashem, and we get to be down here? So Hashem said, you know what? You're right. God listened to him. God said, you're right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it that on Sukkot, we're going to have a thing called Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which we're going to bring the water. And I don't know if you guys remember this. We learned on the altar, I believe we learned this in one of the classes, that there was a bowl. I think it was actually a silver bowl with 2 holes in there or something. One was for wine and one was for the water libations that they would do once a year on Sukkot. That's why we have so many parties. On Sukkot, it was a rejoicing for the water. That was a big party. It was the biggest party they threw all year. Was the intermediate days of Sukkot, and they celebrated the gathering of the water. I think they would go to the spring and they would bring the water to the temple, and it was a major party. So the water, Hashem said to the water, don't worry, we're also going to, because the whole time, by the way, in the flour offerings, actually, we keep on saying, flour and oil, but where's the water? So I guess they made the matzahs without, not like we make matzah today without water, it was just flour and oil. So Hashem said, once a year I'll put you on there, on the altar. So the water said, no, it's not good. We want every day. We want to be close to you, Hashem, every day. So Hashem said, fine. Where does salt come from? Salt comes from the ocean, at least this kind of salt. And Hashem said, I make a covenant with you, make you a deal. Every sacrifice will include salt, and it's representing the water. Although it's not physical water, salt comes from the ocean, and therefore the salt is representing the depths of the water, which is not going up, and they're being brought on the altar. That's how we're bringing the water, the lower waters, onto the altar in Hashem by pouring the salt. And that's why salt comes in, a fascinating reason where salt comes into the picture. So salt in the flour offering that's being burnt on the altar, salt on the bird, salt on the animals, everything had salt that was burnt on the altar for this reason. Okay, so now we have, we discussed that there's no jelly from fruits allowed, and we discussed that there is. And so where do we do with the jelly? The jelly is brought once a year when the fruit grows. Then we represent the fruits of representing all the fruits that's brought to the altar to the Beis Hamikdash, but not in the altar. That's brought to the temple. But you're not allowed to put the sweet nectar and jelly stuff on the altar. However, there's another time which you do bring another flour offering, and that is actually not chitim, not wheat, like we make matzahs from, but barley. There is, I believe, 2 sacrifices which barley is brought. I think maybe barley is more like an animal. Animals eat barley, and that is, I believe, in the sota offering. And over here, if you want to bring you told me when the first fruit grow. What about when the first grain grow? Okay, that's the first grain go. Aviv kolo, it should be in the aviv, in the spring, right when the grain starts to grow. Koli be'esh, gardesh carmel, you should grind it when it's still soft and moisture, but then you also put it over a fire and you roast it and you make it softer, I think maybe to crush it better or something. And that will represent the coarse crushed flour that's brought also once a year, not just as fruit brought once a year, but also there's a special time which once a year, before you start eating the grain, again, we ask Hashem for his blessings. I think we also did something to that the winds shouldn't be bad winds and so on. We moved in different directions, but here we're talking about the barley, and the first, right after the Seder, I think it's the second day of Pesach, we bring this gift offering. And this one you'll put again oil, and you'll put the frankincense on this barley you bring. Mincha, it is a mincha offering to Hashem. The last verse, and the kohen will cause it to go up as a reminder for the person, Migirsha, Mishamna, taken from the flour of it, the flour of the barley, and also the oil. You're going to then scoop out all the frankincense and put it up to burn in Hashem. And my friends, this is the meal offering representing our food and our grain and all that stuff in this special sacrifice that the poor man, or even not the poor man, even sometimes we would just do it once or twice a year, we'd have these gift offerings brought before Hashem. Any questions or comments on today's Chumash? Yes, David.
So I understand about the animals that were sacrificed, and I understand about what we're talking about tonight. I remember it from last year, but I guess my question
that's very good. That's impressive.
I guess if I can remember,
I like that.
A year ago, yeah. But
I'm saying when we start learning, you're right. We're actually learning it for the second time. Right. Which is amazing because you're actually going to learn it much better once you start remembering stuff and then learning it. It's a whole nother level, which is really cool. Yeah.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
So I'm not clear about, the thought that I had in my head was, you're saying about the salt and everything. I'm like, oh, these Kohanim, they're eating so much meat and then there's carbs, like they should have fruit, they should have some vegetables. So, and I'm not trying to be, facetious here, but how did they get other food products besides the sacrifices? Did they sustain themselves, or did they rely on trade? Or
it was a very unhealthy diet, right?
Yeah,
I would think you would agree. This is like, it's maybe a guy's dream, it sounds like going to a restaurant, like you have steak,
right,
and you bring like the burger. It's like a
steak, steak and fried tortilla chips, right.
It's like. Where's the dairy? I don't know. You gotta.
Yeah. But I'm saying, like, what are the vegetables and stuff? It's part of a healthy diet to have some roughage. So were they allowed to farm? Was it prohibited? Did they trade a little bit? How did they have kind of I realize the Torah may not talk about it, but
no, but they had to give the Kohanim a truma, a percentage, whatever it was, 2% of a lot of their produce that grew too, I think.
Okay.
For sure from the grain, but they could also sell some of that. They might have been able to sell some of that stuff that they were allowed to others, so they could use that as commodity. You're right. I'm saying like in other words, this is just the temple sacrifices that was brought. This is not including the 2% that everybody had to give to the Kohen. It's not including the 2%. and there were other gifts that were given too, and some of the gifts they were able to sell.
Right. Well, but I guess my question is,
There were Dr. Atkins. What kind of diet?
Dr. Atkins would be very happy with this
Yeah,
diet.
that's right. Wasn't he like all like this is protein? Like this is the heavy protein.
All protein. But
Atkins is a no grain. Nobody knows what he died from, but
too much steak. But
okay.
but
I remember my grandmother must have been a real follower of Dr. Atkins, because in her kitchen she had a sign or something, and she was like, she had Dr. Atkins' book. I think it was very popular like 20, 30 years ago, Dr. Atkins' diet, no?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of low carb diets or no carb diets. You have to get into ketosis. But I guess my question is was there a prohibition against Kohanim participating in agriculture?
This has nothing to do with the Kohanim thing. The food diet is not about the Kohanim. This is simply the person had to bring a sacrifice, and the Kohanim helped the person be forgiven by being very holy, very learned. They were eating that person's food, and that would help the scholars. The person gained forgiveness by the scholars eating their food.
I get that. I remember that. It said that the main focus is to be serving Hashem and to work in the, and to be in the Mishkan and in the temple. But were they allowed to spend a little time planting, or was it just, they were?
By the way, so I want to say something. We learned this the other day. There at a certain point there became too many Kohanim.
Yeah.
So they would only work in the temple twice a week out of the year. By the way.
Okay.
So it wasn't. And then when that family, who was I telling? I was telling you today. So thank God. What happened to my cousins is, right, my grandparents were two people beat up, broken. They came from Russia through Ireland, whatever. My grandfather was actually a shochet in Ireland for a while. They would. I think the meat would go to Israel. They had a bunch of people shachting. Anyway, he eventually made it to the United States. Two people with actually one child, and then he had 4 more kids in the United States. And at that point, each child became now a major operation, became major grandparents, and each of his children has today, thank God, I don't know, between 6, 7 to 14 children themselves, and then I don't know how many grandchildren they had. So you can imagine the Kohanim grew tremendously, and then even the groups that were twice a week, they would still split up who got to serve in the temple. So in a way, I guess it wasn't such an issue. What would they do the rest of the time? They wouldn't be serving in the Beis HaMikdash. They would be teachers and and whatever. I guess the time spent in the temple having to do the sacrifice, which everybody wanted, wasn't that wasn't a full-time job perhaps going on. I guess
they could drive an Uber.
They weren't allowed to own real estate. That was the problem.
Right. I remember that.
They weren't allowed to own real estate. So I don't know if how they could invest, whatever. There was some real estate that was given to them, but they would have to find other ways of doing business, and so on. It's an interesting question, but so again, this crazy meat diet, I don't know if it's crazy. Obviously, this is what Hashem wanted, but what might not have been a full year situation going on. Sorry, David. If you think a whole year you'll be getting steak like that, flaming. Give me some flaming young.
No. Look, I'm a Cohen, so I got to prepare for the future.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds pretty good to be a Cohen in today's class.
Yeah.
You get oven fried, you get deep fried. The Kohanim probably had a preference. Which one they like better, and they're like, please bring us the oven fried. The deep fried. So we want the good deep. By the way, it was funny. I was thinking of when I was learning this in my mind. I'm like, what did I want to give you an example? And I'm like, when you go to the pizza store and you get the garlic nuts, the garlic nuts. That's what I was thinking about. I happened to be after I happened to be in DL. My wife was there. It was so stressful dealing with the whole passing and everything else. We went out to eat for a few minutes, and I got garlic nuts in the local we went just quick to the pizza store. It's called Slices or something in DL. On Woodmere Avenue, I got some garlic nuts after thinking about it all morning, learning this stuff. I had some garlic nuts later on. Yeah, Ira.
So, didn't the Kohen get money from the firstborn? Didn't you have to buy from the Kohanim also?
Yeah, but that wasn't so much. Today, it's like $70. I mean, I don't know if that would be a very good livelihood to live off that. But yeah, he would get that.
I'm saying they had money to buy things that they may need. Like food-wise.
Correct. They also got the firstborn animals too, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, they had wives, so the wives, I mean, maybe the Kohen didn't go shopping, but the wives did the shopping.
They could probably go shopping too, but they probably had special Kohen markets because the Kohen had to stay pure, couldn't become impure, it was prohibited
Huh.
for him to become impure.
Huh.
So they had like, you go into Wegmans or something, they have like the Kohen section, like with Corona now, stay away. So you'd be like very careful, check out over here if you like if you have the green slip today, you could go around, whatever, like the green pass, you got the vaccine. So the Kohen had like the special line probably for Kohanim where they would go. Yeah, so you're right. There were other monies given to the Kohanim, but it's not thinking of, I don't want to mix up what was given to the temple and what was given to the Kohen. But you're right. There was, I believe, the firstborn animals were given to the Kohen. The Kohen could sell some of that stuff. He could actually sell. He could flip and barter or sell whatever, so on. So yeah, there was, and if he wasn't working full time in the temple, what stopped him from having a garden or so on in the real estate that the Kohanim got? So that's a possibility too. Yeah. That's true. They did get the money for the firstborn went to the Kohanim also, correct. The 5 sloim, the 5 sellas, today I think it's what, $70 value or something like that. But yes, there was definitely other stuff, the 2% that they had to get also from the crops that were grown, the trees and stuff that had to go to them. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, should we move on to Tanya? You guys good? Who's with us? I guess it's a regular daily classes with us, not nobody from the Tuesday night class. Okay, so let's go to the